What's up, everybody? It's Alistair, and welcome to Headspace, where I just offload my opinions about these awesome shows I watch and some movies. And today we're doing The Last of Us, titled Long, Long Time. And if you could hit like and subscribe because you find this insightful and you want me to do some thinking for you, that'd be great. And I think the first weekend of the month or the middle weekend of the month, I'm gonna start putting out the shelved D&D campaign I had. It's just a serene and calm little thing you can picture and imagine. But really, it's just a live RPG imagining. And before I even press play, I usually make these right after I watch it, but I want to do it before I press play this time and probably go over the story and storyline. Just a little touch, because I just loved how people craft things like that. But it kind of looks like this episode and the ones after this will be Joel experiencing like a lot of things for the first time, maybe like socially or like experientially, if that's a word, but a good chance to look at the dictionary again. But in the episode 2 one, I discussed a little bit that Tess was kind of like giving the reins over to Ellie in a way, and that Ellie was kind of like the young version of Tess now, not even like Tess when she was younger, and that she's kind of like ran up her mileage a little bit. But Tess wanting to be, or just being a good companion and wanting the best for Joel, and even though Joel, as he is not very like well versed in the world, versed in survival, 1,000% yes, in any environment possible. He repeatedly does the very first thing is to survive, and that's just like pretty basic, even for like psychology and just characters and the story. In general, according to psychology, it starts at survival, and then eventually it goes up to love and feelings. And in the normal list of things, in the hierarchy of needs, there's a social aspect in there, but the order besides the first being survival is usually like arguable. Like the order of, he's like, oh, you'll ultimately need love or affection, but sometimes you get the love first and then you don't have the things because circumstances. To bring you a bit of a research paper, I was just doing a preface to understanding the characters, just so I could be invested in the characters and love these characters over time. But to bring it back around to Joel, like, he's always just been at survival mode. So literally, you could bring almost anything to him and he'll like complete the mood that you were wanting or trying to discover. Like, he hasn't done like much to wear down his mileage or put mileage on his odometer, to say. Somehow he's just been like immune to being weary or even reaching out and having accomplishments, with either way of bad or good. And again, like, I'm sure somehow they're building up to a flashback, even though that's usually like the easiest thing you could do, like with Joel, but they're building up to it, and we'll see his initial reactions to like certain things, like the infected and like running into survivors or people stealing from him or him having to steal. But I doubt we'll ever have to hear him say, it's like, I did what I had to survive, because he's just doing it. Never is he gonna justify his actions. I just wanted to have my 2 cents out there before the next episode, the third one right now. It's one of those conversations you wish would happen, like, as like you're in between episodes. but you really like don't want to like force it or like push it because I had a natural conclusion, so I want it to naturally happen, but it did not. So I'm putting it here. The most that got going was like, oh, I can't wait to see what happens. But most people, like, I'm around on a surface level, is pretty good at assessing, like, what you're, like, about from, like, what you said. So they won't, like, expand on much because they know I'll get there. Especially if you're, like, settled into an area. It's not exactly, like, play by play, this is what's gonna happen next, but I do really hope that they include some context with the scientists, and they may or may not uh, have been like building up to meeting these great minds that will maybe cure the thing, or at least what was feeling Firefly. But even if you know play by play what's gonna happen, not even being from the games, like, do you really want to be that person and ruin the excitement? So I'm a little conflicted in having this natural discussion. And you may never know. Like, sometimes it happens, and at least I don't want to ruin the story. So, like, you say it wrong anyway because you're, like, excited. Just a few seconds of finding the secrets of life and then just letting it flutter away. Just to safely go back to be like, that man's mad. But enough initial sparks and flints of whatever. I'll start. Whew. I'll have to start after my breather at the end of the episode. Whew. There's a lot of stuff to sink in. For The Last of Us, I was gonna recap the story and then do the discussion points. Looks like I'll still do that, but I'll start at the end with the outcome. At first, I'm like, man, like, that never happens. One being because you wouldn't be there for it to be seen like that. And two, it never happens like that because there's always, like, other people accidentally or on purpose putting ideas in your head, good or bad. You stripped away everything, and this is uniquely them. And again, with everything as it is now in the world of The Last of Us, it's only brought to you by the infection. I'm really liking this pattern they're doing. And to go out into the land of the living with the here and now, you have a promise to yourself, and Bill fulfills that. And then you have a promise to other people, but Bill and Frank only have the promises to each other. And I'm so mad, jealous, happy, and fulfilled because in this episode they do those snapshot memories, the kind that you kind of do like in olden times or while you're reflecting back when you're so old. And along the way, Frank or Bill purposely goes out of their way to create like another longing memory to bring in the title a little bit. Like a long, long time ago, this happened a lot everywhere, but at least once, majorly, where even in the wake of it, people longed for it. There were other obvious, like, snapshot memories and other general moments between Bill and Frank, but they cemented these certain ones, or snapshotted, to permanently, like, maintain and frame everything that happens between them. With the lucky part only being at the beginning and then throughout the whole thing. Because they chose and promised those snapshots to each other. This is definitely like a commentary of what type of couple will do it next. Like in the expectation of everybody and like what will be normal. Not that it isn't now, but there wasn't like, oh, like they'll do this. Like they just had that first part where they'll be together. And now there's like a little roadmap instead of just like the heavy word of expectation. There's like a little guiding principle and a guiding dream. Just because of you see a male and female in a couple, and that happens. Not everyone will go out of their way to learn about that story or watch that movie. But that will be the last time I mention gender in this, because the story in this is just too great to nudge to one side or the other. While it's happening, unless you're like a certain type of long aging people, meaning you're like quick to fall for someone, but not because you're easy, just because you already feel like something grand or great's gonna happen between you and another person. And eventually you'll have all these instances, like seemingly random and just of two people. And you could arrange some of these snapshots of your life with this person and see that they're your love of your life. And you could even go further and rearrange those love of your life snapshots and look at them and know, like, this is a person you fought for, this is a person, someone you wept with, and someone that picked you up when you're down, and someone you long for. Maybe it's all at once, maybe it's at separate times that you want to see them or you want to miss them. You have all these moments where you could see them in different lights. Seeing Bill and Frank like this reminds me of this in general. It may get tough, it may get hard, but there's always ways. Even though Bill and Frank were never caught on camera saying the L word, but they definitely showed us the till death do us part type. And they definitely had the hints of the partners couple and then the business couple or like the power couple and like sprinkles of the comparison couple. There's some stuff that they didn't put in there from the romantic movie formula. It's just like those like, oh, why something, and whatever the why is, it's like explains like why now this, and it's like, oh, well, that's why it's part of the relationship now, and how you can do it too. Turn to camera, zoom in, or spot whatever, like one of those signs he is dot dot dot. A lot of people cut themselves off from that, like the signs your relationship is dot dot dot, like plummeting or doing well, or you should take it to the next level. And people cut themselves off of that just because they don't like the nature of the magazine or a magazine. It's in a magazine, but not to mix it up with the promise that Bill and Frank had with each other, and how being cut off from like any like outside happening kept it like pretty great and stable or romantic. There's just like some feeling, like any feeling, the feeling anytime they looked at each other. There was never like a dead space. There's always a feeling that was happening because of them. Or I should say, because them. Just one word difference. They never had to be original, but they were. They had to set themselves apart from nobody else. And saying that kind of sounds weird, but after watching it, you know what I mean. But to do it some real justice, I'll have to not explain it and just let you witness it. But to go to everything else from the beginning, I guess now, we get another hour and a half almost of The Last of Us, and we start with Joel and Ellie right after Tess saves them from the horde of infected. Instead of saying a time increment, they go with the captions. They say they're 10 miles away from Boston, and you realize it's only been like most of 2 days with Ellie. There might have been an overnight thing, they might have slept, but I doubt it. Joel does a little ritual tribute for Tess, and he stacks these stones. Also, that meditative, relaxing thing with the smooth stones, and he stacks a few up and has a few moments to himself. And then Ellie does this moment with Joel saying how she doesn't want him to blame her for Tess. It's kind of funny because there's like these moments like you kind of question like in the land of the living or like real life, but I'm gonna say in the land of the living from now on these. Like where like someone asks you something, but you know they're wanting to ask you something else. Ellie like asks if Joel wants his jacket back because he's using it as a blanket to keep her legs warm. But Joel does this thing and like practically ignores her. And Joel reaches out with giving her some jerky. And I just thought it was funny because that passes as a conversation for Joel right now. And then Ellie like actually is speaking and talking about how she's never been in the woods. But she does that, oh, pesky, like, ooh, distress. But Joel's like, I don't know what that is. As he's like continuing to rummage through his bag, it's all these like non-verbals. But eventually Ellie does a different kind of hey, like F you, man, like what the heck? Like this whole time Joel's been like avoiding being soft or like getting comfort or an apology. And like you know it's like such a test thing to do. It's like, hey, no, I wasn't gonna say sorry. And Ellie's like not wanting to be blamed for something that's not her fault. But she says it to Joel herself. He's like, you made a choice. It's like, no one made Joel or Tess go with the plan, and no one made them take care of Ellie. It's just kind of funny because, like, Joel's like, oh, I already had this conversation. But it's like, oh, okay, like, I'll let you wrap it out. I just wanted to hear that first thing where you're not going to say sorry. I think this is the main takeaway for Ellie and Joel. Like, eventually you hear about more of the lore or history of the outbreak or pandemic. Even though it's just a history lesson, like Joel finally like opens up and tells her what happened. How it was September 23rd, a Friday, and by Monday, like everything was like down and like all different. And after Cumberland, the gas station, you get another one where Joel initially is like trying to avoid the area because he knows what's about to be there. And you get a image of a bunch of luggage with a bunch of like skeletons. And how if the military or the Federa, probably the military at that point, were taking you to a QZ and they didn't have any room, they just that was what was left. Because even if they weren't infected, there's less to deal with because there wasn't any room anyway. And then to section it off, where there's just a moment with only Ellie, she's like resentful and vindictive uh, about the infection because in the gas station she finds a little trap door and then a trapped infected person with just the head sticking out of the rubble. She's pulling out her knife and then she like cuts it open to see if it bleeds or anything normal like that. And then eventually she just like stabs it. Which is the first like Ellie like, that's probably not a good character trait. Like that's gonna lead somewhere bad. And this is all happening while Joel's like looking for a stash that he left in the Cumberland Farms gas station. But then it's like too quiet because before that she was asking like so many questions. But she pops back up with some feminine products, making it seem like none of that happened. But that's about it. I mean, to go back to Bill and Frank, but for another reason, like they're in a colonial home, and like I was like thinking he was gonna like colonize and like want to be like the leader of some group, but you kept getting like little histories. It's like, oh yeah, this is Lincoln. It's been here since like 1763, I believe. And the whole time while he's like farming and like putting up a little perimeter and fence and all those traps and the security cams, you can imagine like at some other point where it's like, oh yeah, like I heard all the stories, so like this happened like before and now it's happening again. Like I wasn't even a prepper really. Like when he's like talking to Joel later, Bill, he just like, yeah, sure is it. Not wanting to tell him about like the history of the house and stuff and like open up and like tell the history and like empathize with another person. Because in his note to Joel later, he's like, I never really liked you, but I respected you. It was just I'll do as my fathers did before me. But I guess there's only like one house really that you notice, and like the church right next to it. Like I kept making the parallels of him in the tricorder, like shooting off all those people, like at the fence after he met Joel and Tess, and that time jump in Nick Offerman's or Bill's 20 years flashback or 20 years back. He has a gas mask on, but like that's probably only because it's like a historical item that his family had, and he just could use it. And if you're like kind of like doing the same thing with this little like office or bunker, I guess he says, like way at the end, there's like a little trap door underneath, like a little chest. Like that was probably there in the 1700s too. But that's all I had for you. Like I just wanted to point out and comment about some of the stuff like for pretty much Bill and Frank's episode. But that was it for The Last of Us episode 3 titled Long Long Ago. And if you found this any way insightful or you're feeling charitable, hit that like and subscribe. But only if you did. And then if you want, we can all cry in the comments together. So leave that there. And I'll see you next week for episode 4. Should I share some of my history so we can all bond? I feel like that's like my kind of sharing, except with all different expressions. But hey, You look good crying. And it shows.